Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending the International Myeloma Foundation's Living Well webinar, Building Your Resilience During Challenging Times. Spearheaded by the IMF, March is Myeloma Action Month. As part of this year's program, we continue to focus on increasing awareness of the signs, symptoms, tests, and treatments for myeloma, but also to nurture our resilience. We can all take small actions in our lives to enhance our well-being, fortify our resilience, and improve the lives of those in the myeloma community. Today's webinar will serve as a kickoff to Myeloma Action Month, and we hope this provides you helpful tools and resources to coach your own resilience. Before we begin today, we wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webcast, please submit them through the Q&A engagement tool. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if we run out of time, please know that we do capture all of the questions and we'll try our best to address them in future blogs and videos. We've also included links to additional resources in the related content tool, which is that blue square with the paperclip at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to thank our sponsors for their generous support of today's call, Bristol Myers Squibb, Janssen, Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speakers today, Dr. Brian Durie, co-founder and chairman of the board of the International Myeloma Foundation, and he will be joined by Dr. Susan Dunnett, senior lecturer at the University of Edinburgh. Sue has a long history of volunteering with the IMF and began as an information and support officer in the UK, where she set up and facilitated support group networks. Sue has also attended the first ever Support Group Leaders Summit and has been interviewing myeloma patients and caregivers for many, many years. So Dr. Durie and Sue, would you please welcome and join us?
Well, thank you so much, Robin, for that kind introduction. And I'd like to add to your comments about Sue. Sue, we're very, very pleased to have you with us today. Sue works at the University of Edinburgh, which is where I graduated from medical school quite a number of years ago. But we come from the same part of the country, about 20 miles outside of Edinburgh. And so it's really a great pleasure to be able to work with Sue on this really important topic of building your resilience, especially during these challenging times because of the COVID-19 pandemic. If we can move forward, yeah. So as you just heard, we really do thank our sponsors to help make these kind of educational activities possible. Bristol Myers Squibb, Janssen, Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. Next slide, yeah. So we will get through this together. About a year ago now, just at the start of the pandemic, just as we were in lockdown for about the first month, almost exactly a year ago now, a plane flew over my house here in Los Angeles, and it wrote these words in the sky right above my house. We will get through this together. And I think that this really is emblematic of working together to enhance resilience. Because when you have myeloma, when you get up in the morning, you may not be feeling so resilient every day. And so this is something that needs to be worked at. And part of that working is working together with friends and family and everyone who might be able to help you in a variety of ways to really do the best job to build up your resilience and strength to achieve the best for yourself and for your family. And it's really great that Sue has developed this program looking at how being aware of the things that can be done and being coached can really help. And so if we move forward here, yes. And so a key thing is that, and I know Sue will be emphasizing this, is that resilience is not just kind of like bouncing back from bad news. It really is an ongoing active process. And so we see a lot about resilience in nature. In the spring, and it was true this past spring, after a harsh winter, the daffodils came up as usual. So nature illustrates for us how there is that inherent ability to be resilient and come back and do what needs to be done. Next slide. And so to be specific about this in the case of a myeloma patient, so how does this process work? Well, when you get that first word from the doctor, and this is that first horrible moment where the testing comes back, and the doctor says, well, I'm afraid we've looked at the bone marrow and we've looked at the blood tests and the x-rays and the scans, and unfortunately, we have a diagnosis of myeloma here, and we're going to have to work hard to get it under control. And so the first thing is to learn as much as possible about myeloma and to recognize that clearly this is a problem, but it is a problem which can also allow you to continue with your life and to be able to continue to be an active person with your family and friends. But to achieve that, there needs to be a focus and attention to, well, what are the steps that are going to make this possible to get the best care that I need? And so this is the part which is an active process where you need to get in shape physically and mentally in every way. And Sue is going to go through this so that you can be in the best shape to reach out and get the care which can be the best for you. And you need to resolve in your mind that this is not going to be overwhelming, that it is a solvable problem, and that you will work closely with your doctor. Obviously, you do need to have a doctor that you trust, and it may be that you need to get a second opinion to achieve that, but ultimately, you need to be working with a doctor that you trust in partnership to move forward together. But then ultimately, it's really important to truly understand and to believe that success is achievable, that you will respond. Chances are these days with the therapies that we have that you will respond, and that much longer survival is possible now than has been possible in years past, that there is an excellent chance that you can do well, hopefully for many years. And so really fully engaging with that belief is so important to allow you to move forward strongly. And so resilience is a key aspect of this, and I'm just so happy to be able to turn it over to Sue now, who will take you through some of the details of what resilience is and how you can work to enhance it. So Sue, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Durie. I hope everyone can see and hear me and see the slides. My internet just dropped. And so I'm getting a thumbs up from Robin. I think we're good to go. My internet dropped. If it drops again, I'm going to come out and come back in. So I'm delighted to be here with you all the way from Edinburgh in Scotland to think about this idea of a coaching approach to building resilience. And as Dr. Durie was mentioning, and Robin was mentioning, I've worked with the IMF for a number of years. And predominantly, this has been researching support groups and how they help patients and caregivers, but also researching support group leaders. And it struck me that support group leaders are particularly resilient individuals. So it's really thanks to support group leaders that my interest in resilience grew, and it's kind of flourished into different projects that I'm going to tell you about today. So for today's presentation, we're going to think about what is resilience. So we're going to work with a kind of shared understanding of what resilience is. We're then going to think about the types and sources of resilience that I've identified through my work with the IMF. And we're then going to move into this idea that Dr. Durie's mentioned about coaching resilience. So how can we use from coaching to help us individually work on our resilience? And then we're going to introduce this Resilience Builder tool, which I believe is available to all of you as a PDF document. It's essentially a large table with some questions in it. I'm going to go through it in the presentation to show you how you might want to incorporate it into your life to work on your own resilience. So the picture on this slide here depicts me at the Support Group Leaders Summit in Dallas in 2019, when I was able to get on a plane and you know, come to the US and share some times with the support group leaders. I'm standing in front of what we called the Wall of Resilience Gallery. And so this was a project that I did with the support group team in the IMF, where we asked people who led support groups, so patients, caregivers, and professionals, to submit a photograph of some feel resilient or represents resilience to them. And this was a really lovely project whereby we gathered, I think, upwards of 50 different images of things that made people feel resilient. And we then displayed them, as you can see, in a form of a gallery at this very large conference meeting that takes place annually with the IMF. So the gallery itself was a very uplifting experience to walk through. It was a very uplifting experience as a researcher to engage with these wonderful images. So the wonderful images here are actually the kind of foundation and inspiration of what I'm going to talk about today. Because one of the things about using visual data, so gathering in images of people's kind of perceptions of something, means that you can dig much deeper into the metaphorical meaning, the deep meaning hidden in things. I think if you ask someone about what makes them resilient, it's quite hard to answer. But then capturing an image allowed people to understand the things in their life that they were really drawing on when they were looking for strength and when they were looking for that ability to keep going when things become difficult. So that's where we kind of started this one, although I have been working with the IMF interviewing leaders for many years, is this kind of visual foundation. We're going to look at some of these images, and we do have permission from the people that submitted the images to share them in our presentations today. So thinking about resilience, this is a definition from the American Psychological Association. And I think it's useful to have a definition because we use the term resilience in lots of different ways just in our everyday language. But to have a definition helps us kind of have a shared understanding. So resilience is the capacity to adapt in the face of adversity, trauma, and stress. And what I really appreciate about this definition is that it's not, as Brian says, it's not, Dr. Durie, if you might excuse me, it's not, as Dr. Durie says, about bouncing back. And I feel very strongly about that idea that it isn't about returning to the way that we were. So when we have experienced adversity, trauma, and stress in our life, we carry it with us. We may become better people or have things may improve for us. It's not necessarily about carrying negativity with us, but we're not necessarily transferring back just to how things were. So not about bouncing back. The American Psychological Association talk about adaptation. So this in the sense that it is a process of adapting to something that is adverse or stressful or traumatic. They also talk about different things that are key to resilience in general. So having a plan and options within that plan and being able to carry these out are things that they feel are fundamental to being able to be resilient. And I think one of the things that struck a chord with me here is the idea of having a plan. And of course, the IMF and other resources often help you have a plan with your treatment, for example, or your loved one's treatment. But we can often use this idea of having a plan in other areas of our life. We may not always have options, for example, but having a plan can be really empowering. And sometimes we don't necessarily even carry out our plan, but having a sense of how we are going to approach something can be very empowering, and certainly is a kind of bedrock of resilience. The next one, confidence in our own abilities and knowledge. This takes a lot. I think we don't always necessarily have that. And those of you who are newer to myeloma, you may feel a lack of confidence about your knowledge and your skills and your abilities in this arena. And of course, those will grow as you learn more, as you experience more, and the confidence we will build. So again, these are things that are resources that at times we have and at times we may not have. And the idea of the kind of building tool today is to help you think about different resources, different skills, different connections that you can bring into your life that really will help nurture that resilience. Next, skills in problem diagnosis and solving. So very much thinking about what is the issue that's going on and then seeking steps to solve that. And that's directly what we're going to be looking at today in the Resilience Builder tool. And then supportive relationships encourage resilience. And of course, this won't be a surprise to any of us. Our relationships are so important. But I think it's also important to think of that notion of supportive relationships, because some of our relationships require work. They draw more than they give to us. So we can think about relationships, particularly that nurture us, that create support in our lives, as being really central to that quest for improving our resilience and overall well-being. When I do a project, I like to get a kind of sense of it from the people who live with the particular issue. So it's been particularly important and really a wonderful experience for me to interview people living with myeloma over these many years that I've been working with the IMF. And I think, as a researcher, it's really key, because I'm not someone living with myeloma, although I do know lots of people who live with myeloma, but it is not my life. So I think it's very important to kind of get a sense of what it means to people living with myeloma. So that was one of the things that I looked at for this project, was just a little kind of set of questions that people answered around what resilience meant to them. And I think we can learn a lot from these quotes here. So the first one is from Thomas, who's a patient, and he says, "Resilience means never giving up, even when obstacles and setbacks are placed in front of me." So I like that we can learn from this quote the idea of obstacles and setbacks. So resilience, of course, is about dealing with the really difficult things in life and keeping going. And as Thomas says, never giving up. Valerie echoes this idea of never giving up. So she's saying resilience is not giving up in the face of adversity. Instead, you make the choice to adapt and thrive while going through what you are facing. And again, for me, there's lots to value in that sentiment. And I think particularly I'm picking out there the idea of making a choice. And so that there's an activeness in the relationship to adversity, that people can say, I'm going to choose to do it this way, I'm going to reject that other route. And so making the choice to adapt and thrive, maybe making the choice to accept a diagnosis, for example, and thrive while going through things. I think that's a really powerful sentiment from Valerie, who's also a patient. Robin Toohey, who I'm sure many of you know, who we were just with a moment ago, who is a caregiver, talks about, for me, resilience is a helpful idea and it's a tool to help me refocus. But on days that it is challenging, I just think tomorrow may be better. I just have to get through this moment, this day. And again, I think we can learn a lot from this from Robin about resilience, the idea that resilience isn't actually something that's constant. It comes and it goes. We have to work at it. We're not always feeling like we can take on the day. We can't take on the adversity today, but maybe tomorrow it will be okay. So the idea that Robin, who is aware of her own resilience, uses it as a tool, but also allows herself this time to say, it's not there for me today necessarily, but it's going to be there tomorrow. So I think that's an important kind of watchword, is that we don't think that we have to be resilient and, pushing through adversity every day. It's just not possible. And then Jeff, who's also a patient, is saying, to me, it's a process of returning to a much more normal life after a real challenge with the disease. And so Jeff reminds us of the way in which myeloma can transform, can change, can go through stages, can be in remission, can relapse, so that there's sometimes a little bit of shifting of what life is like living with myeloma. So he talks about this as a process of returning to a normal life. And of course, he's not talking about getting back to, life as it was. It's kind of that process of reshaping life in that way of being resilient. And Tiffany, who's also a patient, leaves us with this very nice sentiment that being resilient for me means having hope. And I think there's a really nice kind of symbiotic relationship between resilience and hope, where they do feed each other. So if we're feeling resilient, we have the capacity to feel hopeful, to look forward to the future. And if we have hope, it allows us to be resilient. So there's a kind of really deep connection, I think, between issues of coping, hope, and the whole idea of resilience. So as I said, we created this IMF Wall of Resilience project, which was a really uplifting project, and I think we did all feel quite resilient when we were engaging in those visual images. I looked at the visual data as a whole, and what I wanted to do was kind of see if I could kind of track any themes or different meanings within all the images. So when I looked at all the different photographs that people had sent in, I was looking for kind of themes and patterns and what was emerging there. So I identified 3 different types or sources of resilience that I thought were being depicted in the images and the stories that people were sharing about their own resilience. So I grouped these into 3 different areas, which we're going to use to think about our own resilience in this session. So one is physical resilience, the next is mental resilience, and then we have emotional resilience. I'm going to explore these a little bit more each on slides as we move through. We found, obviously, that resilience is linked to coping and to coping with being, with all aspects of myeloma, coping with all aspects of living with myeloma, but also that it was very key to enjoying life. So it wasn't just about the medical side of myeloma or dealing with, for example, the physical ramifications or side effects. It was much more about allowing people to enjoy life and then kind of concerned with overall well-being. And I mentioned to Dr. Durie that it was quite interesting that there wasn't anything medical in any of the images that people sent in. So while sometimes literally it is treatments and medicines that literally keep us going, these weren't what people were thinking of when they thought about what keeps me resilient or what is resilience. It was much more things closer to home and closer to their relationships. And what I proposed to the support group leaders in the sessions that we worked on together, that you could work on all 3 areas to enhance overall resilience. So thinking about physical, mental, and emotional resilience and bringing that together can then create overall resilience. So that's what we're going to do today. I then invited the groups to use this concept of the wall of resilience in their support groups to celebrate and enhance their own resilience. And many of them did that. Maybe some of your support groups did that, and if they didn't, it might be something that you want to explore with your support group, and Robin and the support group team can certainly help you to do that, and I'm very willing to be contacted about that as well. But what they found in the groups that did undertake this shared experience of talking about resilience and sharing photographs of resilience was that the group bonded very well in the sense of learning more about each other. So learning more outside the myeloma, learning about each other's lives, and creating a kind of community spirit. So creating kind of collective resilience together in their group. So now I'm going to go through the different types of resilience, and we have the lovely images to share with you. So I just feel joy when I look at this slide. I hope it is joyful for you too. This is where I thought we were seeing emotional resilience. So emotional resilience, and the source of that emotional resilience being about connection, support, love, and joy. So unsurprisingly, a lot of the pictures that people shared with us were of their families, their friendship groups, and we see milestones here as well. So we see a father walking his daughter down the aisle. We see children graduating from, I think, university. We see friendship groups. We see families. We see friends going to sporting events together. So we see that connection that we develop with others and how it really nurtures our resilience. Next, we think of mental resilience. So this was a kind of area where I was seeing something in the images that was much about de-stressing. So moving outside of stressful spaces, creating space for release, creating space and seeking peace. So there was kind of, in the descriptions that people used in the images that they shared, there was that sense of moving away from stress towards peaceful spaces. And this actually could take a number of different forms. So through your hobbies, whether it's, hitting the road on a motorcycle, or whether it's sewing, whether it's Western dancing. So engaging in things that create a release for you, that create peace, that creates space, and whether it's watching the sunset to create that kind of sense of peace overall. And then animals, there was a lot of animals came up in people's resilience, a lot of dogs, cats, some donkeys even. So the connection that we have to the animal world and the natural world, creating this kind of mental resilience. Dogs as unconditional love and affection, as real kind of sources of de-stressing, I think, particularly those of you who have stressful days when you're out of the house, when you're greeted, when you come back in. And physical resilience, the idea of the importance of physical strength and renewal and movement. And obviously, this took lots of different forms. But it was definitely a sense of sometimes physical achievements from the past or from the current times. So running marathons, Ironman, symbolic elements like we call them trainers here in the UK, but running shoes, I believe you call them. So the running shoes being symbolic of that person's ability to hit the road and run, and then being out in nature, walking, the renewal of the sunrise in the morning. And I really love the picture of the ferns here in the corner. And this is, I believe, from Barbara Davis. And this is Life Finds a Way, was what she called this beautiful image of the ferns that come back every year. So that sense of renewal as well is about that physical resilience as well. So these were the kind of ways in which I was building up different ideas around different forms of resilience. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the coaching mentality. So the idea of, what is coaching and why might it be useful here? So coaching is very simple. It is obviously kind of working with someone to allow them to get the best out of themselves or their performance, whatever it may be. And many of you may have been coached in your professional life, or maybe you are being coached right now, or maybe you are a coach. Coaching, of course, is used, we see it in sports heavily, and that might be what immediately comes to mind when we think of coaching. But coaching is increasingly used in terms of life coaching, so coaching individuals to get the best out of their life, their skills, their relationships, and also used heavily in organizations to optimize staff performance and indeed staff satisfaction. So coaching works by asking really simple questions. It's about identifying and creating actions for change. And basically it works on three very simple premises, and this is assess the now. So thinking about how things are now. What's the reality of my situation? It then would ask to, and normally you would do this one-to-one or maybe in a group setting working with a coach. For this session and for this tool, we're working with you asking yourself these questions. So you're kind of coaching yourself. You can do it with someone else if you want to get into that kind of coaching conversation. You could pair up with someone and do it together. So the next phase after kind of assessing the reality is then about thinking, where do I want to go? you know, this is my reality, but where would I like to be? So that's that kind of visualization of where you want to go, and then setting goals that will take you there. And identify and work on those steps. And then importantly, reflect back on that about what works and what doesn't. Coaching to me is about using this reflection to gain clarity. So that whole sense of thinking about where am I at right now can be really powerful, to tune in with yourself, to see how things really are. Because sometimes we're quite used to just carrying on with life and not really checking in with ourselves. And particularly in this pandemic, it can seem like just get through today, just get through today. And actually coaching us is to take a step back from that and really think about, you know, how am I really? So it also can help us to identify barriers that may be stopping us reaching our goals. But importantly, also it asks us to set out these steps where we can meet our goals. So coaching really is about encouraging positive change, and that can be attitude change or behavioral change. But also, I think for me, one of the really nice things about coaching is it gives you control of your situation. So it says that there are small things that you can do to change things today. And I think that's really important, particularly now when so much can feel so out of our control and we can feel really powerless in this current environment, that actually we can take little steps and little bits of power back into our lives to say, okay, well, this is what I'm going to be working on for me, you know, to make, you know, to increase my well-being and then ultimately increase resilience overall. So where do coaching and resilience fit together? I mean, for me, it's kind of quite natural because resilience is a process. Resilience is not, it's not a gift or a quality. It's not a superpower. I mean, we do see people in our lives where we think, my goodness, they are very resilient. They just keep going. Nothing stops them. It's not because they are born this way or it's a particular gift. It is because they work at it. So I think seeing resilience as a skill or a process is a really good way of shifting the mind around it to then believe that we can all be resilient, not all the time, of course, but we can all be resilient if we work in a particular way towards resilience. So resilient people work at it and they build their resilience and they build their kind of wellness and other aspects of their life to allow them to be resilient. And obviously there are certain situations of privilege which allow people to be more resilient than others. I'm not ignorant of that fact. I'm not saying that everyone has equal opportunity to be resilient because there are different levels of adversity, of course, out there in life. But there are ways in which we can each think about our own position to our own resilience. I've been told by patients and carers over the years that acceptance of the diagnosis enhances resilience. And I think coaching is a process whereby reflection engenders engenders acceptance. So that sense of kind of where am I at now is a question that really does suggest a certain level of at least reflection, if not acceptance, of diagnosis. And then importantly, growth from there. So the idea that coaching is about moving from perhaps a space where there's not much power being felt into one where there is, just by planning what you will do. So coaching is definitely not about telling people what to do. And we do get a lot of this at the moment. And of course, some of it's really important and we have to do it. We can see Dr. Durie there wearing his mask in the office in LA. And that's important. But I also think we get a lot of kind of well-being, wellness, health messages at the moment. And sometimes they don't really feel like we want to incorporate them into our life. So the idea about coaching is that we're identifying our own answers and our own actions. And so therefore, there's not somebody else telling us what to do. No one's coming in and saying, you must drink 3 liters of water today. It's just about what we want to do for ourselves. And we can pick and choose what actions we take. So coaching, in brief, is a tool which can help us all work at resilience, and we can use the coaching questions to set goals to help us build our resilience. So this is a resilience builder tool. As I said, it's a simple table, but what I want you to notice about it is that it's a table that is blank. So the idea is that you would fill it in for yourself with information that helps you understand where you're at and where you want to go and where you might take that, and then reflect on whether that worked overall. And as I said, there should have been a PDF that's been made available to you that tells you more about, or shows you more about, how to actually use the builder itself. So the builder tool, you'll notice, has 4 columns. In the first column, we've got the questions here that can prompt you to reflect and try and understand where you're at and then where you want to go. And then we've got 3 further columns that relate to the different aspects of resilience. I find it helpful to break it up because then it really helps you understand what you can actually do in each different area. And so if I asked you overall to think of a plan for your own resilience, you might not be able to do that because it's actually quite hard to think, oh, what do I do? But if you break it down into what can I do about emotional resilience, what can I do about mental resilience, and what can I do about physical resilience, it's a little bit easier to actually come up with things. So how to use this tool to coach your resilience? Take some time out in a comfortable space and think about the questions. Give yourself a reasonable amount of time. If you want to try and fill this out, give yourself an hour. Take some time somewhere you enjoy sitting in your home or somewhere else, and then really think about your answers to the questions. So in effect, you're kind of coaching yourself. As I said, you may get a friend, a family member, someone else to ask you the questions. If you want to kind of mimic that kind of coaching experience, that might work really well. So first you're thinking about, where am I at? So you begin with a kind of scan of where you're at with each quality. So where am I at with my emotional resilience? Where am I at with my connection to other people? How full is your tank in each area? And you can score this between 10 being the best it could possibly be and 0 being the worst it could possibly be. And if you score this across the tool, I'm just going to flick back onto that. So if you score this across the tool, so you'll see here in the first column, the first square here, you could score emotional resilience. So maybe for you that's quite good at the moment. So you maybe give that an 8. And then you score mental resilience. So you think, how am I doing for stress levels? Well, actually they're quite high. So maybe I'm actually only a 5 there. And then same for physical. So that then allows you to think about, well, it seemed that my mental resilience was the one that was low. So now you know which area you might want to work on. You may want to work on all 3, or you might actually want to work on one that you're doing well, but it can be good to identify the one that's at the lowest point to try and bring that up. And then you're doing that comparative process. So you might find, for example, you're physically thriving, your physical resilience is feeling really good, but emotionally your resilience is diminishing. You're not feeling connected, you're not feeling necessarily supported, for example. So remember, you can work on one area, don't overload yourself and try and work on more. So then you would go through the questions for that particular area. So if it's emotional resilience, you would go through the questions there. And what you're really thinking about is, where would I like to be for that emotional resilience, for that connection? So, where do you want to go with it? Well, you maybe want to feel connected to your friendship group who you haven't been in touch with as much as you normally would because of the pandemic. So then it's about, well, what steps do I take? What information do I need? What resources do I need in order for me to feel that connection to the friendship group? So I'm just going to flick back through to the Resilience Builder tool. So again, it's then, let's say it is emotional resilience. So we've worked out where we're at. Maybe we're not feeling as connected. Where would you like to be? Then thinking again, well, I would like to feel connected to my social group. And this isn't about duty or needing to catch up with someone or feeling guilty because we haven't caught up with them. This is really thinking about what's going to nurture me. So it's not about duty, like I must phone that person because I really owe them a phone call. It's really about being quite self-focused and saying, which connection can I draw on that's going to really nurture me? So what resources do I have that's going to help me reach that goal? And a resource may be a particular friendship, a particular friend, or it may be, something completely different. what resources do I need? Is a good question as well. So you maybe need time. You maybe need a reminder. Maybe it's just that your days are very busy and you don't have the time. So something as simple as a Post-it note above your kettle or your cooker or on your fridge or at the top of your laptop, things that remind you to do the things that matter are just little tools that are going to help you engage in that. And then you can work out your next steps. So what exactly am I going to do to reach my goal? And then at the bottom here, we have this idea of quick wins. And you can see it in my worked example at the end there in physical resilience. So this is one that I've worked out for me. I'm not getting out enough in the fresh air in the weekdays. I'm not getting enough vitamin D. So I'm thinking I need to go out for a walk every day. And this is actually true. I keep saying this. In fact, I said it in November to the support group, and I wasn't actually very good at getting out there. It's springtime here, so maybe I'll be better at getting out there for the walk. So I've worked it through for me. So level 6 for physical resilience, I'm not feeling too good there. There's sluggishness going on, and I'm needing the fresh air. I've got my health. You know, what resources do I have? I've got my health. I've got green space near me. I've got clothing, footwear. I need time, motivation, structure. Really what I need is structure. So I need to set the time. I need to put it in my calendar, and I need to go for the walk. So what's the quick win on that? So this is the idea of actions that we can take now which help us move towards our overall goal. So quick wins are something that you could decide to do right now, today, tomorrow, one thing that you know that's going to make you feel better. So it could be calling the friend, it could be going for the walk, it could be, in my case, the early night. It could be, for example, calling the doctor that you've been putting off, something that you've been putting off that's drawing energy from you. So doing something that's going to be a quick win for you that you know afterwards you're going to feel good that you did that. And maybe you want to take a moment right now in our session to reflect on, when you finish this call, is there anything for you today that's going to be a quick win that you can take away that you know once you've done that, it will improve your day? And this isn't about improving the day of anyone else, it's about improving your day. So think of something as we're talking, as we're finishing up today, that's going to help you in moving forwards with your resilience. So that's the Resilience Builder tool. As I said, you do have it on PDF, so I'm hoping it's going to be something that you find interesting. At the very least, think about that notion of quick wins. Think about that notion of, what can I do today that's going to take me closer to the goal? And if you don't want to fill out this form, if it seems too much, think about the questions that it's asking of you. And at the very least, also think about maybe scoring yourself so you can see how you're doing emotionally, mentally, and physically. And maybe then you can kind of think about where you want to work and where your energy should be going. So this is about finding your own pathways to resilience. As I said, it's not about other people telling you what you should do. And certainly the IMF can help you, and we'll learn more about that in just a moment. So what we've covered today is this notion that you can reflect and say, where am I at? Where do I want to go? And what steps do I take to get me there? And then through that, you identify actions and resources to build resilience. And then you reflect. In your Resilience Builder, you'll see the last row is about reflection. So once you've taken some action, what worked for you and what didn't? So for example, it clearly didn't work for me in November when I was saying, yes, I'm going to get out for a walk 4 times a week. It didn't work because I didn't put it into my calendar of my daily work. And when I sit down at the desk, it's difficult to come away from that. So I reflect on that and think, what action can I take? A simple reminder, an alarm bell, making an arrangement to meet up with a friend rather than walking on my own. So reflect on what didn't work and what did work, and then tweak your reflection again. So it's a kind of cycle that you can work through where you reflect and then take that back into where I'm at. But most importantly, celebrate. Celebrate your resilience. You can share your images of you engaging with your resilience building on the IMF social media, and the IMF Myeloma Action Month will tell you lots of different ways in which you can engage with social media on the subject of resilience. You can create a gallery at home. It doesn't need to be for public use. You can create your own gallery of images that make you feel strong, they make you feel resilient, they make you feel happy or joyful, just like the images that we saw. But that can be for you. Put it in a place in your house that you see every day, and it will make you feel good every time you look at it. Music, of course, is inspiring. Playing it, listening to it can help you feel resilient. And then sharing stories of resilience, whether that's in your support groups or in your wider caring networks, your churches, wherever that is, sharing stories of resilience is, I think, is going to make other people feel resilient, and it's going to bring it back to you as well and increase your own resilience. So I think basically working on resilience, the whole idea is that by consciously thinking about what makes us resilient, then we improve our resilience for ourselves. So I hope this has been really useful to you. As I said, the Myeloma Action Month is going to show you lots of different ways to engage with your well-being, your wellness and resilience as you move through the next month. And they have some wonderful images to help you share that journey on social media as well. I wanted to go back and kind of finish with some words from Tiffany. Because I really like this idea, and I want it to remain in your mind, the idea that resilience is individual and it looks different for different people. It doesn't look the same for everyone, and we don't all get there in the same way. And I think it's really vital to think of it that way. Otherwise, it may become a pressure on us that we feel we must be resilient and strong all the time. And that's not what this is about. This is about nurturing something that's not necessarily always there so that we can build it, and that it's different for everyone because everyone's context of adversity is different. So thank you so much. It's been such a joy to be with you today.
Well, thank you so much, Sue, for this wonderful presentation. I can tell you that a lot of questions and comments have been coming in. The first thing I'll say is that you have several people who are so pleased and congratulating you on such an excellent presentation and the wealth of knowledge that you convey. Before we have some, okay, so really, really nice comments, which is great to see. For those of you, we have a lot of questions started out with COVID-19, and we might cycle back around to those, and if not, we will be able to answer those offline. But it's certainly telling me, Sue, that the pandemic is having a strong influence on people's resilience and their ability to cope with things. And so, for example, if we go into a first question here, suggestions on how to build resilience when you can't be with your friends or family during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this is an important one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard, and it's like that for us here too in Scotland. My parents actually only live 45 minutes away where Dr. Durie and I grew up, and I've not really seen them this year. So I think, I mean, I don't have a magic answer to that one, but I think reflecting on the sadness that we have and understanding that sadness as a kind of form of grief, because we're missing people and we're missing that connection. And I think then thinking about what connections can I make? So working on our emotional resilience there and thinking about what connections I can make, which I feel might nurture us. I think we've got to the point, I am speaking personally, but also what I've noticed in my students as well, because I teach at the university, is there's a little bit of digital fatigue and social isolation going on. And I think we have to try our best to combat those two things. And nobody really wants to go on a Zoom call when they actually want to hug their grandchildren. I know my parents feel the same way. But I think if there is a little bit of emotional connection that we can get in different forms, whether that's writing to someone, whether it's sending flowers, whether it's receiving flowers, whether it's engaging in Zoom calls, phone calls, and all these types of things. I think first acknowledging the sadness and then thinking, right, well, this is the situation. Where are the connections that I can draw, and what is my preferred way of doing things? I find old-fashioned telephone really welcome, because it doesn't have the pressure of the technology failing and all of this kind of, element to it. So seeking out connection where we can. And then also, I suppose, sometimes we might have people that we can connect with who are maybe nearer to us than our family, and maybe are in our friendship groups. And so using that as a resource to create social connection. And it doesn't replace family, but it may help us feel more connected and more in touch. But I think, yeah, we do need to acknowledge our sadness on that, and then move from that position.
Thank you so much for that. There is a related question, and you might have some specific comments on this one. What activities do you recommend for de-stressing for an elderly person who lives alone and can't often get together with family and friends because of COVID? So anything additional come to mind? You've already given some suggestions related to this.
Yeah, so I think de-stressing is a difficult one, actually, and I think it really does depend on what is pleasurable for you. So I think sometimes de-stressing can be about space and peace. So it can be about, rather than engaging more with, for example, social media, phone calls, even television, it can be about seeking peace with quiet. So I think sometimes there can be a sense of, we're missing that connection, but in other ways, we're actually engaging so much. I mean, you may not be, but we might be engaging a lot digitally. So I think seeking peace and seeking relaxation. I think nature, if that's something that is working for you, getting into nature. I mean, by which I don't mean hiking. I just mean literally walking about an area, if that's possible for you. Taking notice of the changing season, as Brian has reminded us. It might be time for the spring bulbs for you. So I think looking for very small things each day, that's the kind of idea, is that it nurtures in this way with small things each day. So I'm afraid I don't have an answer. It really works with what matters to you. So I think reflecting on what you care about and what you love, and if that's gardens, if it's crosswords, if it's walking in your neighborhood, if it's church, really prioritizing that in your life, and then also prioritizing the quiet and peace, because I think that really helps with de-stressing.
Yes. Thank you for all of those comments. And so maybe to take us for a moment in a slightly different direction, has the IMF considered creating a series of seminars that would establish resilience super users? So maybe some patients or caregivers who really have worked at this. This could benefit groups to have a go-to person with a framework of understanding about resilience. So maybe almost like a buddy system, it's sounding like to me, with a buddy who is really working well on trying to achieve resilience.
Yeah, and I mean, there's two things there. I think one thing could be to hear from and learn from the skills that some caregivers, professionals, and patients have that they think they're bringing to their own resilience, skills and practices. So you can learn about how they, stop themselves from becoming tired. How do caregivers stop themselves, or not stop themselves, but how do caregivers deal with anxiety and worry, for example? That's all part of how they stay resilient, is some days we worry more than others, but of course that whole thing there. And then I think your point about resilience buddies is really good and would work very nicely in a support group setting where people, if they wanted to select a buddy, could work with someone to kind of almost keep them accountable. That you look from my, I'm telling you to be resilient and to change your behaviors, and I can't get myself out for my walk every day. So there's that thing of being accountable to someone else, which can really work. So making yourself accountable to someone else is another way that we all can do it. So we can say to someone, okay, can you check in with me today to check that I've done that thing I was going to do? Right.
So another small point here, it seems like mindfulness would be an excellent tool to help. Maybe you could touch mindfulness. I think maybe has different meanings for different people, but you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I think, one of the contributions to the Resilience Gallery was a really beautiful consideration of the idea of resilience and mindfulness, and using mindfulness to create a kind of peaceful space. One of the things that can go along with mindfulness is setting an intention. So sometimes it can be nice to set an intention for the day. So to say, today, the intention can be behavioral, or it can be about your attitude. So you could say, today I'm not going to engage with social media, or today my intention is to seek peace. Whatever that intention can be, it can kind of shape your day. And obviously mindfulness is a good way of taking time out, as I was saying, to seek peace in terms of practicing that kind of mind relaxation. And there's lots of apps that can work for that as well. So I would say that mindfulness would undoubtedly help with resilience, because it's an overall well-being tool.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so now we have a question for kind of more of a day-to-day reality check type question. This person says, "Great presentation, thank you. How does one nurture resilience in the face of a constant barrage of discouraging news about relapsing myeloma?" So a really practical point, if you're getting bad news, how can we work to try to manage that?
Yeah. So, this is difficult for me to answer. I don't want to tell other people how to feel. And again, I think if it's news about you personally relapsing, rather than just reading about the concept of relapse or other people relapsing, then I think, again, recognizing that you are possibly in a state of kind of loss. So you've lost a form of stability that you had, and so being very kind to yourself over that period in terms of not expecting resilience, not expecting yourself to be pushing on through and strong. That isn't what this is about. It's about being kind of aware of how you're feeling. And so I would say, in the context of any context, think particularly about your connections at that point. Think about your mental resilience. So are you stressing by reading and researching a lot, and kind of is that coming to be stressful, for example? So what practices are you doing each day where you're engaging with this thought of relapse? I think we can kind of perpetuate worry by thinking about it, incorporating things that you can do and that you enjoy in every single day. During this time when you're dealing with bad news, and when you're thinking of a new way of kind of treating the disease or working on a new treatment plan, I think the process of working on a new treatment plan can feel obviously quite scary, terrifying, but also can feel quite empowering, because it's part of that. If you can get access to the care, is part of that process of building a plan. So it is part of that process of resilience, is planning. Right. And obviously the IMF can help you with that information. Your medical team can help you with that information.
Right. I'd like just to pick up on that last point. I think that in that situation, especially these days, we do have a lot of new and exciting therapies in this situation of relapse, even if you've had a lot of previous therapies. And so it can be hard when you're frightened with the news to kind of focus back down and say, okay, where is the closest place that I could get that exciting new therapy? And that's where your support team could come into play, where you can connect with some other patients or friends, and they could say, well, let's help you check on the internet and see what trials are open for your situation, or check with some other people in the group and see what trials are open at a center near you. So getting to that practical level to de-stress and really have a plan, so to speak, of what would be that best next therapy. And the good news right now is that frequently there are quite a few options, but it can be so frightening when the news comes in that it's hard to refocus and settle down to make that search. And that's where getting consultation, getting input from friends and support group members can really help.
Yeah, and I think even something as simple as writing things down. I mean, I'm a kind of list person, but I think part of the process of kind of taking something from the mind to the hand onto the page is that you can then tangibly see it. So you can say, okay, well, this is my plan. And even if the plan begins with, phone the doctor, or, begins with the very first stage, that still is an action that you're going to take that's going to move your way of dealing with this forward.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And so we're actually moving towards the end of the session. There are quite a lot of other questions coming in. A lot of people want to make sure that they can have access to the slides and, what will be the follow-up on this. And I do apologize to a number of people who have sent in other different types of questions related to COVID-19, or there's one here about MGUS and smoldering myeloma, some things like that. And so, unfortunately, we don't have the time and space to deal with that, but we will try to reach out and try to answer some of these questions. I'll end with, you maybe can comment on this one, Sue. A lot of museums have virtual tours that can help with de-stressing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
the sense of being transported somewhere else, somewhere You've always wanted to go.
Yes, actually, I can end with a kind of a funny story on that. You maybe have seen the penguins in Chicago. During the pandemic, the penguins were getting upset, just being cooped up with no visitors to the zoo. And so they started to let the penguins out to go for a walk around. And it was just amazing. And these are videos that you can access online where you have the penguins out walking around, looking at other areas in the zoo where they go and check out the shark tank and see the dolphins swimming around. And then recently, this is a weekly thing now, where they took the penguins to the gift shop, and you can see them taking a look at the books which are talking about the penguins, with the picture of the penguins on the cover. But recently, they took the penguins to the Chicago Museum of Art. And so you have the penguins walking around the museum looking at the art gallery pictures. And this is incredibly fun to see. And it just reminds us that, we need to look in every possible way that we can to maybe de-stress. But this is fun to check out, okay?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to look at that. I love penguins.
Yeah, they're just so funny and cute, and this is especially funny and helpful. It was helpful for me. It de-stressed me for a little bit of time. So thank you so much, Sue. Many comments coming in that this has been a terrific webinar, so full of information and lots to follow up on. And we can say that we will be following up. And want to continue to work on this because it is so important to try to be as strong as we can despite setbacks, which it seems are inevitable these days, but can be worked through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm a believer in the small actions leading to kind of overall, bigger change. So these little steps that we can take, that the IMF is going to help you take over Myeloma Action Month as well, that's going to make these little things kind of contribute towards the overall resilience. So even when things feel large and scary, there still is a way of taking back a little bit of that. And so that we don't need to feel quite as afraid. We can work on small things that are in our control.
Absolutely, absolutely. To regain some of that control for sure. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Robin with some closing comments.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Durie and Sue. This really was incredibly valuable, and I know so heartfelt, Sue, from you with all the research that you've been doing, and to help us to each nurture and think about how we can coach our own resilience, but also to feel like we don't have the pressure of having to be resilient every day. And so one thing I would like to remind our participants today is that the IMF is continuing with our virtual education programs. And so many of the questions that came through about COVID or about treatment, we are going to be having a virtual patient and family webinar, and it's going to be on From Vaccine to Variants, the latest COVID-19 safety guidance. And the date for this webinar is Saturday, March 13th. It's a free 3-hour virtual webinar beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern, and covering the topics that I see in the chat box, a lot of these topics will be covered. So make sure, write that date down, go to myeloma.org, register for that. And we'll also have more time that day for Q&A and panel discussions and even breakout sessions. The other question that was brought up in the chat box was the replay of this webinar. And yes, we are recording this, and it will be available early next week, as well as the ability to download that Resilience Builder tool that Sue so nicely showed us how we can use with ourselves and with our support groups out there, those of you that attend the support groups. And then also, last but not least, please don't forget that the IMF info line is always available to answer your questions. And that toll-free number is 1-800-452-CURE, and that's 2873. Missy and Paul and Judy are always happy to take your calls, and they are available Monday to Friday from 9 to 4 Pacific. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really hope that this is going to be helpful to you. And a big, big thanks to both Dr. Durie and Dr. Dunnett, and of course to our sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Janssen, Oncopeptides, and Takeda Oncology. And thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Absolutely, I would second that. And so thanks to Dr. Susan Dunnett. And so thank you all who have listened and participated today. We appreciate your questions in the chat box, and we will follow up on some that we didn't get to. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much.